In the United States, there are more than 150 violent crimes committed every hour. At their best, crime scene investigators help put the guilty in jail. At their worst, the guilty could walk free. The margin of error is razor thin. At Penn State University, 12 forensic science students have been given the opportunity of a lifetime.
By the time you leave this course, you're going to know how to investigate a crime scene.
Dr. Robert Shaler, a pioneer in the field of DNA analysis, has designed a unique course in forensic investigation.
That is blood.
Cutting-edge technology.
Can you see it?
The latest evidence-gathering techniques.
Did you get a print?
The most realistic settings imaginable.
Oh!
These students are the future of crime scene investigation. If they don't do their homework, someone may get away with murder.
Oh my gosh, there's blood everywhere.
It was overwhelming.
There are bloody handprints.
Today, the students of Crime Scene University will enter their most complex crime scene yet.
We have to place the body upstairs, and now we have backspatter on the other side of the head. Ready?
Dr. Shaler and his assistants set up this week's crime scene in duplicate, leaving the same evidence in both cottages. Each team will have to process an entire house. The blue team will process Spruce Cottage, and the gray team will process Pine Cottage. Each scene has 2 floors, multiple rooms, hallways, entrances, exits, and the exterior. Both teams enter the first floor of their house. The gray team immediately locates the dead body of a female.
Oh my God.
Female deceased. There's a gun in her hand. There's a pool of blood behind the couch. There are 2 wine glasses there. That note on the table appears to be a suicide note.
Downstairs, both teams have located the body of a female with a gunshot wound to her head and a gun in her hand. Upstairs is a similarly gruesome scene.
We're going upstairs.
And when we walked upstairs, I saw a male victim that was dead. And there was a bloody letter opener on the ground, and there was also 2 bullet holes through the wall.
Upstairs, both teams immediately locate a dead male victim with an apparent bullet wound in his chest and a bloody knife on the floor.
These students received a first officer's report, which gives them some background information without revealing what happened. The first officer's report is really a compendium of statements made by people that he's interviewed.
Police responded to shots fired at the residence. When they arrived, a man and woman were exiting the house. The man was holding a gun. Both suspects were taken into custody. A female was found dead on the first floor of an apparent gunshot wound to the head. A male victim upstairs was found with 2 bullet holes in his chest.
This crime scene is definitely different. There's 2 dead bodies. One looks like it could be a suicide, and then there's another one upstairs that's pretty much clearly a homicide. The 2 dead people seem to be fairly unrelated. So we're trying to place the players in a situation that makes the most sense.
There are a number of things that the students are going to have to figure out. Things like, who was the shooter of the female victim downstairs? Who was the shooter of the male victim upstairs? Is it possible that this was actually a suicide, or was it in fact the homicide? Cassie and Laura, you're the team leaders.
I think I need to have my confidence with me today for this scene, and whether or not I internally feel confident, I've got to act confident.
As far as what we're doing, Rick and Aaron will start on the photography with all the establishings. I'll have Christine and Earl start on the upstairs with the sketching. And Victoria and I are going to start looking for dust prints and stuff like that. Okay.
Cassie was taking charge. She was telling people what she wanted to have done. She was making decisions. Laura is the team leader for the blue team. Laura has the least experience, so I'll be interested to see how well she handles this crime scene.
I like to think of all the game plan that we're gonna have when we go into it, like what I'm gonna have different people do, try to figure out who's gonna be best at working on different things. I think it's probably best if people do things that they feel really comfortable with. So if people feel really confident in one area, and I think that we should work it out as a team, deciding what people feel most comfortable with.
I've given the students 8 hours to process this scene. The reason for that is that it's important that they understand that there are pressures to get this kind of work done as quickly as possible without compromising the quality of the work. We want them to be able to catch this murderer before the trail goes cold.
Me measure, you draw.
It's gonna be 70 and 71.
Both teams begin processing the scene and looking beyond the obvious evidence.
Don't touch anything.
Did you guys find some stuff out here? There's markers in there.
Upstairs in Spruce Cottage, the blue team locates a bullet casing in the room where the deceased male was found.
The cartridge case is going to have an ejector mark on it. It's going to have a firing pin mark on it. So these can be examined microscopically and compared directly to a test fire from the weapon once a weapon is recovered. And this can give you information that this particular cartridge case was fired by this weapon.
Students learned about this evidence in a lecture 2 days ago.
What about cartridge cases? Fragile evidence? What do you think? Who says yes? Hands up. Who says no? It's not fragile evidence. You're all wrong. Cartridge cases are extremely fragile evidence. They can be kicked. The positioning of cartridge cases at the scene is important because guns eject cartridges in a particular way. And if you have a nice pattern of cartridge cases at that scene, it tells you something about the weapon that fired it. You want to protect cartridge cases.
We got 2 shell casings. We found out that the casings and bullets and parts of jackets that were found upstairs are not the same as the bullet that was found downstairs. That means that there was 2 guns involved.
The gray team has located 4 different bullet holes in their scene. So they're going to be looking for 4 cartridge cases to match up to those 4 holes.
Downstairs, the students of Crime Scene University locate 1 bullet hole in the wall next to the deceased female. Upstairs, both teams have located a total of 3 bullet holes in the rec room.
Got it.
So far, we've found 3 cartridge cases. We found 1 in this room under the radiator and 2 upstairs. There's at least 1 more that should be somewhere in here, theoretically. Hopefully, with further search later on, we'll be able to find that.
With shooting scenes, there are many important steps that crime scene investigators must take into account.
They still have to decide whether or not they're going to bag the hands for GSR. I mean, these are things they should be doing.
GSR is gunshot residue, and it is usually found on the hand of the person who has fired a gun.
What about the body itself? Is not the body its own crime scene? One of the things we're concerned with about the body is fragile evidence. You need to be concerned about gunshot residue and the fragility of gunshot residue. When someone fires a weapon, a handgun, the positioning of where you're holding the weapon is going to be covered in this gunshot residue. And so you can look at a person's hands and get an indication as to whether or not they might have fired a weapon. So what do you do with it? How do you protect it? You bag the hands. That protects that evidence. You've done your job by making sure that that fragile evidence is protected. If that deceased is moved without bagging the hands, you lose potentially important information which will indicate whether or not this person actually fired a gun. If indeed it is a suicide, there would be gunshot residue on the shooter's hands.
I don't know all this evidence out here.
I don't know what any of it is. It needs to be logged, like, now.
If they don't bag the hands for gunshot residue, then they're going to have a very difficult time piecing this together. They're going to be forced to guess. There's no guessing in science.
The students of Crime Scene University are investigating 2 dead bodies. A female victim is on the 1st floor of the house, and a male victim is upstairs. 2 suspects were seen leaving the house and were arrested. The students have just received a statement from a witness stating that the female victim opened the door for the female suspect 3 hours earlier. The witness also reported that an unidentified man matching the description of the male victim was led into the house 1 hour later. A daunting challenge for the youngest team leader.
This is the largest crime scene we've had so far, so I decided that we should treat it as 2 different separate crime scenes, have the downstairs as one, and then have the upstairs as the other.
Both teams have decided to focus on the downstairs scene first. In an effort to confirm the witness statement, the students begin looking for footprints at possible exit and entry points.
We're looking at the footprints so that we can figure out who was actually in the house and potentially like a path that they took.
Over in Pine Cottage, the gray team is lifting wet prints in a possible entry point using iodine crystals.
We have a little iodine viewer that we're going to use on a possible wet print that's on the floor. And what we'll do is we'll blow some iodine crystals over the print. The iodine crystals will kind of cling to the footprint, the residue that's left, and then dust some starch on top of it, and then take the iron. When iodine and starch react, catalyze with the water, it turns a purple color, which will bring up the print for us to see so we can photograph and be able to identify the footprint.
With respect to footwear evidence, we are concerned with entrance and exit points because we want to know where somebody came in, we want to know where they left.
The blue team is trying a different method to lift the footprints.
I lifted several prints, dust prints, with the electrostatic lifter, and I didn't have a whole lot of luck. I think we positively identified one of them out of probably 6 or 8 lifts. They just didn't come up too well.
Since they're not likely to find a lot of footprint or footwear evidence, they have to focus on other kinds of physical evidence to give them a way to reconstruct what happened here.
Over in Spruce Cottage, the gray team is processing an apparent suicide note, allegedly written by the female victim.
Well, it's a suspected suicide note, so if the person who supposedly wrote it's fingerprints aren't on the note, then it makes it a little bit less likely that it's a suicide note.
We have an apparent suicide here, and we have an apparent suicide note. We are looking for the fingerprints of the deceased on this note.
We took the suicide note, we used anhydrous on it, which basically you just put it in a tray, you submerge the letter in the anhydrous solution, then you take it out, you let it dry quickly, and then we put it down and use a steam iron to raise the prints, and actually the fingerprints come up like a purplish color. And so now Rick's just taken some close-up photos of the fingerprints.
Awesome. The gray team is working well together to complete their crime scene, but the blue team is having trouble getting everyone involved.
Crystal, can you think of anything that can be done?
Well, I can do the blood spatter, but I've been waiting, kind of holding off from doing that.
We've tried to get Crystal involved throughout this class and throughout all the scenes, but she's kind of in slow motion. We're trying to deal with that.
I'm not really sure what's going on with Crystal. I think that she has a different work ethic than us. She tends to do things a little bit slower. And at one point, she even said to me, she's like, well, I'm just going to sit here until you tell me what to do. And I was like, well, there's lots of things to do. Everybody else has stuff to do, and I can tell you a few things if you want to do them.
While Laura is dealing with team issues, Josh notices some inconsistencies with the possible suicide victim.
I can't quite figure out why the gun's in her left hand if this is the entrance wound and you've got a bullet going through this wall and the bullet's stuck in that wall, so you can tell the direction of travel definitely was this way. Doesn't make much sense why it'd be in her left hand.
There's fouling too.
This afternoon we're going to be looking at gunshot residue so we can determine the distance from the end of the barrel of the gun to the target.
Clear!
One of the questions might be, is it a suicide or is it a homicide? And the stippling and the fouling is going to be important in determining that. Stippling around a gunshot wound comes from burning particles that are ejected when the gun goes off. And these particles will burn into the flesh and leave what look like they're dark pinpoints. Fouling is the black soot that comes out and then covers the area as well. The pattern of stippling and the pattern of fouling are going to give you an indication of how close that weapon was to the entrance wound when the gun went off. And if it's a wide pattern, then the muzzle of the gun was further away. If it's a very tight pattern, that indicates a near contact wound.
Look at how much the GSR dispersed. It looks to me like it would have had to have been pretty close, but not real close, because it wouldn't have got spread out that much.
Right.
I would say probably 6 to 12, which is kind of tough for a suicide.
Over in Pine Cottage, the gray team focuses on the gunshot residue on the hands of the victim.
Gunshot residue is typically particles, and these particles are very easily knocked off. We want to bag the hands as soon as possible to protect the gunshot residue from being lost.
So what we have to do in order to test the hands for GSR, we actually have to bag the hands so it doesn't get disrupted in transport, and after the medical examiner has his or her chance to deal with the victim, that's when we'll be able to do our testing. If we find that there's no GSR on either of her hands, it pretty much rules out suicide.
The gray team is looking at other objects at the crime scene for fingerprints.
There was a wine bottle in the kitchen, so I dusted the bottle with white powder. We got pretty much 3 whole fingers on there, which is really good. Rick's gonna take a picture of it for me, and then I'm gonna try and lift them.
They also need to check for prints on the wine glasses.
I told Christine and Earl when they dust it that if the wine impedes their dusting, then they can dump the wine out.
The team leader for the gray team, Cassie, was talking with one of her teammates about dumping the wine out because they thought the fingerprints were more important. One of the things you look for in any drink is the presence of drugs. Rick eventually prevailed. He said, we have to do drug analysis on that. Rick is a toxicologist, so he understands these things.
We decided to transfer the wine instead of just dumping it out, and we're going to send it off to a tox lab and see if there's any poisons in there.
Finding drugs at the scene could be an important investigational tool.
The blue team has come to a different decision regarding the wine.
Blue team just made a very big mistake. They're pouring the wine down the sink. This is bad. This is really bad. They've destroyed the evidence. This is terrible.
Gunshot residue is a very important but fragile piece of evidence. GSR is easily removed from the hands with normal activity, such as wiping, sweating, or simply placing a hand in a pocket. The students of Crime Scene University are investigating a crime with 2 victims. A woman and a man, both with bullet wounds. The woman appears to be a suicide.
Suicide note, the gun is in her hand, and there's a bullet wound to her head. All the other factors are going to come into play to determine whether or not, in fact, it was a suicide.
All right. I wanted to line the laser up to the bullet hole first.
With the developing evidence leaving the gray team skeptical about the suicide theory, they begin to analyze the trajectory of the bullet holes.
Look at that.
They're going to have to look at the trajectory of the bullet through the deceased's head to ascertain which direction the bullet went.
We're beginning to suspect that this is not a suicide. Now, using trajectory, we can determine whether this was murder or whether it was suicide.
Kind of getting a conclusion that the shooter had to have been somewhere around where I'm standing, because if you go farther back, it's kind of a low, awkward place to hold a gun. So we're thinking that it was a closer kind of shot somewhere around here, and that the shooter could not have fired it while they were in a sitting position.
With just under 4 hours left, other members of the gray team are searching the exterior of the cottage.
This could have been someone who was walking away from the scene after committing the crime or coming into the scene itself.
I'm weighing out dental stone for casting. So we are going to cast the footprints that we found out in the soil.
Dental stone, a simple, inexpensive casting material, when mixed with water, becomes a hardening agent, which gets poured into a footprint impression to make a physical reproduction for further analysis.
It will take about 30 minutes to an hour for this to fully harden, and then we'll have to dig it up, and we can compare it to known samples of footwear impressions.
While the gray team waits for the cast to harden, they run through some last-minute theories of the downstairs crime scene.
The only theory we've been able to come up with so far that incorporates all the evidence that we've collected in this room puts the victim in the path of the bullet. Possibly like a struggle maneuver. I have her like around the shoulder like this. And a left-handed shooter would put the gun up against this side of the head. Pull the trigger here, it sends the bullet through that wall. And when I let go, she kind of falls here. And the blood drips out onto the floor. And all this spatter is actually secondary spatter from the constant dripping of the wound onto the floor.
I'm all right with the end part of it, but the beginning, how does he just, is she standing like this and he comes up behind her?
No, it's more like this. Come on up.
Because I mean, you have to remember that the table's right here and there's two glasses sitting on like the edge of it that haven't been knocked over. We don't have any evidence that there was any kind of struggle of any kind.
So it's things we'll have to discuss in the conference room.
Yeah.
The difference with this crime scene is there isn't so much obvious evidence. Really all we had to go off of was the bullet paths.
So you want to go upstairs?
Over in Spruce Cottage, the blue team is coming up with a similar theory.
This side is higher than this side.
On the first floor, there was a woman laying dead, and she had a gun in her left hand, but the way that we first looked at it, the fouling was on the right side of the head, and we didn't really think that it could be suicide.
Josh and I were processing the trajectory paths, and they show that it's not a suicide, so what we have to do now is find out who the real killer is, and hopefully GSR will help us with this.
Both teams are now ready to focus on the upstairs male victim.
Students are going to walk upstairs. There won't be an overwhelming amount of evidence, so that's probably going to confound them a little bit.
The upstairs crime scene contains a bloody letter opener and 3 bullet holes. The gray team has discovered strands of hair on the letter opener.
Got it.
You got a picture of it already?
Yep. The thing is, when you have a house that people are living in, it's hard to determine what's important and what's not. So in this case, it's on a potential murder weapon. It looks like it could potentially have come from the arm or something.
Who knows?
Maybe it's the hair of the perp. Could be.
The blue team has also moved upstairs, focusing on the trajectory of the 3 bullets.
We're putting the lasers off the ends of the trajectory rods because we want to get a general idea of where the shooter was when they had taken the shots.
Even though was he shot?
That's a good question, too. We don't know that yet.
Yeah.
We'll wait on the autopsy report to make that assumption, though.
On the second floor, when we got up there, we worked on the trajectories up there with Josh, and we thought that we knew the trajectories, and I felt very confident with pointing out all the different casings and the bullets and everything like that, and I think we went through the reenactment really good, and I think we did a really good job.
The gray team has also begun to analyze the bullet trajectories.
I was trying to see if I could get a better idea to narrow down where the shooter might have been. The only thing we've been able to possibly determine is that maybe the victim was in the path of the bullet, except the victim's not oriented right, so there's a possibility that maybe the victim might have moved.
With time ticking away, both teams are feeling the pressure.
This is a really tough crime scene because we've got 2 suspects and 2 victims. There's just so many different scenarios because we really don't have much physical evidence besides the bullets.
With just over 11 minutes left, both teams are wrapping up their processing before they enter the deliberation room.
We casted a print we found in the dirt outside by the stairs, and now we can see the detail of where different elements of the shoe are. And we have matched it to this shoe right here because it has the same characteristics.
Now that the gray team has collected the last piece of their evidence, they are prepared for their deliberations.
I think we've done all we can do here for the moment, and we should go and discuss it in the conference room.
As the teams enter their deliberations, they learn that through a series of interviews, the police have pieced together the following backstory. The male suspect in custody is actually the husband, who lived in the house with his wife, the female victim. The female suspect, the girlfriend, has been having an affair with the husband. The upstairs victim is the ex-boyfriend of the girlfriend. They both have lengthy rap sheets in Florida and have pulled off several con jobs together. Both suspects in custody, the husband and his girlfriend, proclaim their innocence.
There are a number of things that the students are going to have to figure out. Things like who was the shooter of the female victim downstairs? Who was the shooter of the male victim upstairs? Who stabbed whom? Is it possible that this was actually a suicide, or was it in fact the homicide?
I've got a few reports for you.
After Dr. Shaler hands out the lab results to the students, they begin to list and examine the reports. Puzzled by the wife's death, the gray team concentrates on the downstairs crime scene first.
I have the GSR one in my hand. Wife has no GSR on her hands anywhere, either hand.
And then she has no blood spatter on either of her hands.
Well, there's foul play in there.
The blue team decides to begin their deliberation by examining fingerprint evidence.
The girlfriend's prints were on the glass that was closest to the couch, which is where the victim was found deceased.
Suicide note was girlfriend.
The girlfriend is in the living room with the wife. Hands are on the note, and she put the note there.
The gray team also looks at the fingerprint evidence.
We've determined that the fingerprints on the bottle belong to the girlfriend. That would indicate that she was serving the wine.
Weren't we supposed to get the actual contents of the
wine? The toxicology for the south wine glass has alcohol and chloral hydrate, and the north wine glass has alcohol only.
Chloral hydrate is a sedative, often called a Mickey Finn, that enable people to get an advantage over someone else.
So she was slipped something.
She has no GSR in her hands, no blood on her hands. We can pretty much rule out suicide.
Time is quickly ticking away, and the blue team is still having a hard time coming to conclusions on the downstairs scene.
Analysis for non-nitrogenous poisons, wife, chloral hydrate detected.
Chloral hydrates, which are sedatives, were found in the wife.
I wonder if we could have done anything with the wine to see if it was poison. The toxicology report came back and it showed that there were sedatives in her bloodstream, and since we didn't test the wine, we will not know if she was poisoned or not.
The wine was definitely a problem, and we definitely should have tested that. That was stupid.
Anyway, it doesn't.
Who cares
doesn't
about
even
the fire?
matter.
It's not
Like
that important.
Right.
We know that
I think we
everyone
should just
was in that house. So who cares?
I don't know right now. I would just like to talk about something different besides that stuff, because we have a lot more stuff that we have to do.
Now we need to determine who the shooter was.
The husband has slightly positive GSR on just the palm of his right hand.
It doesn't really suggest that he shot a weapon. He was holding the barrel of the gun, which means he was holding the gun such that any GSR on the outside of the weapon was put on the area where he was holding it. So it doesn't mean that he didn't, but it suggests that he did not.
So, I mean, he could have just touched something.
Girlfriend is strong. GSR, left hand, left palm, all that stuff.
All over her left hand.
Yeah.
The girlfriend had GSR on the web area of her hand. This area right here suggests that she shot a weapon.
The ex-boyfriend is strongly positive on his right hand.
And the boyfriend also had a positive GSR in the web area of his hand, suggesting that he shot a gun as well.
After looking at the GSR reports, the boyfriend and the girlfriend were the only ones who yielded strong results. It is safe to put the guns in their hands, and it's also safe to conclude that they are, in fact, our shooters.
Let's go on the possibility that the ex-boyfriend and the girlfriend, they're still seeing each other a little bit. If we go on that assumption, maybe the boyfriend comes in and helps her off the wife.
The boyfriend killed her.
Husband was pretty much negative.
What if the husband had nothing to do with it?
I don't think he did. Single gunshot wound to the head, 3 to 6 inches. Maybe the boyfriend killed the wife and the husband came home or something.
And they eventually go upstairs. It took us a while to figure out what happened in the downstairs scene, but I think we have a theory we're comfortable with. And since we're running out of time, I think we should start discussing what happened in the upstairs scene.
The gray team has already begun deliberating about the upstairs scene.
The husband had a superficial stab wound.
The letter opener has a DNA mixture of the husband and ex-boyfriend.
What if the husband wasn't there at first, he showed up later? He comes in, sees her dead body, Maybe he hears some arguments going on upstairs, and then things go crazy from there. I mean, he's obviously gonna be upset that his wife's dead.
That kind of makes sense. You got the husband and the ex-boyfriend and the girlfriend upstairs, and you got the wife downstairs.
But the husband doesn't have GSR in his hand, so is the girlfriend killing boyfriend?
I think it's possible boyfriend or husband are in a struggle with the knife. Let's say guns on boyfriend. Girlfriend could have grabbed gun from boyfriend and said, hey, you guys stop. I have a gun. Maybe like, whoa, okay, just chill out. Fires the one shot to show that she's serious. That's how they separated. And then she ends up and shoots the boyfriend, bam, bam, twice.
Why would the girlfriend shoot the boyfriend?
Maybe he was abusive.
The husband says, listen, I don't want you to get in trouble, so give me the gun.
I've tried to come up with good theories with the help of my teammates, and I think we're ready to present things.
The gray team has been able to agree on a solid theory. The blue team has just minutes left to decide on theirs.
The husband finds his wife dead, doesn't know what to do. Hears noise, comes upstairs, sees people, starts screaming.
I'm thinking the only thing that the husband was really involved in was getting in a fight with the boyfriend.
Upstairs.
He has marks on the tops of his arms, and he has a stab wound.
Maybe she went and grabbed the gun and they were fighting, and she shot over to the side and was like, stop fight.
Stop it, knock it off.
And then she just saw that he got stabbed out and she just shot the boyfriend again twice. And then went to the husband.
She's upset, she's crying, and he's like, give me the gun. The girlfriend killed the boyfriend.
And then the husband helped her cover it up
to protect his girlfriend.
Both teams have established that there was a struggle between the husband and ex-boyfriend, and the husband's girlfriend shot the ex-boyfriend. They both also determined that the wife's death was a fake suicide. However, they came to these conclusions using different pieces of evidence.
The time has come for you guys to show us what you think happened at this crime.
A ballistic fingerprint is the unique groove pattern created on a bullet from the barrel of the gun from which it is fired. Some states have begun requiring gun manufacturers to test fire each gun they sell and submit a ballistic fingerprint to be entered into a database. In the near future, investigators will be able to match almost every bullet retrieved to a gun and its owner. The students of Crime Scene University are in the midst of investigating what appears to be a double murder. Both teams have just finished deliberating.
Time has come for you guys to show us what you think happened at this crime. Who committed the crime? Laura, you're the team leader.
Yes.
All right, let's do it.
The wife was talking on the telephone, and she walked into the living room. There was a knock at the door. It was the girlfriend who had brought a bottle of wine.
I think we should talk.
They walked into the kitchen. So the wife and the girlfriend had opened the bottle of wine, and that's why the girlfriend's fingerprints were on it, was because she brought it. At this time, the ex-boyfriend walked in. He left his dirty footprints in here, and we could tell because there's also dirt on the bottom of his shoes.
What are you doing in my house?
What are you doing here? Why are you here? I told you to get away. What are you doing? And where's your husband? Where is he?
Now, we know that the boyfriend shot the wife at a relatively close difference, 3 to 6 inches. That was seen in the autopsy that we got back. We also had noticed some fouling on the right side of the wife's head. Although her standing up is a little bit too high, we think she was kind of bent down a little bit in a moving position because that would line it up. Then the boyfriend took the wife and
Cover this up.
decided to cover it up and make it look like a suicide. The girlfriend wrote out the suicide note. Her fingerprints were found with ninhydrin. The boyfriend had then placed the gun in the wife's left hand, and we know that he had shot the gun because there was gunshot residue on his right hand and there was slightly on his left hand, so we think when he was placing it, it went there.
Let's go upstairs.
The boyfriend and the girlfriend were upstairs while the husband came home and found his dead wife on the couch. We came to the theory that the husband came upstairs and found the boyfriend. They got into a struggle. The girlfriend came in. She fired one warning shot off in the distance when they were fighting. The other 2 bullets had gone through the victim. The husband had taken the gun from the girlfriend, and that is why it was found in his possession afterwards.
Okay, so you guys put a lot of effort and thought into this. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go take a look and see what the gray team has to say and their interpretation of essentially the same crime. And then we'll get together and we'll discuss who did the better job.
I'm always nervous when we have presentations. It's natural. Hopefully we'll get pretty close and we'll be able to show that what we came up with is substantiated by evidence. I've tried to come up with good theories with the help of my teammates, and I think we're ready to present things. The girlfriend brings over a bottle of wine, and her handprints are on it. That's why it kind of suggests that maybe she brought it over. She goes to pour 2 glasses of wine for her and the wife in the kitchen. In the kitchen, she puts chloral hydrate in the wife's wine glass. Toxicology report says that there's chloral hydrate in the wife's glass. So she ends up passing out from the chloral hydrate. The girlfriend gives the go-to for the husband to come in. They go to search for the wife's gun. The girlfriend and the husband are searching around the house for the wife's gun. The boyfriend, meanwhile, is coming in. He hears them upstairs, walks past where the wife is, walks upstairs, and he goes straight for the husband because it seems like anytime there's some sort of contention, the violence is towards the husband, not the girlfriend. He pulls the gun, they get into a struggle, and it's just a shot into the dartboard. The girlfriend comes, picks up the gun. The girlfriend fires 2 shots into the boyfriend. She hands the gun to the husband, and the letter opener that was on the floor had a mix of blood from the boyfriend and the husband, so we know that both of them were wounded at some point. Anything else in this room? I think that's it. So we're going back downstairs. The husband and the girlfriend come back downstairs. The girlfriend has the wife's gun, and the wife is starting to come to from being passed out. She starts to get up. The girlfriend has the gun in her left hand, shoots the wife 3 to 6 inches away from the autopsy report. We also, when we were looking for blood in this room, we luminoled it. We found a whole lot of fine spray all over this couch, especially where the victim was sitting. So she had to have been up at some point. She couldn't have been sitting down when that blood was deposited on the couch. There was also a lot of fine spray over there and a little on the wall. So we know that it kind of had to be in this general area, and it had to be close range too, based on the wound on the head and the information from the autopsy. So they placed the gun in the wife's hands to make it look like a suicide. The suicide note was sitting here. As far as who wrote it, we have no evidence on that. The husband and the girlfriend exit, and that ends our scenario in here.
Both teams agree that the wife was murdered, her body positioned on the couch, a gun placed in her hand. But the blue team thinks the ex-boyfriend committed the crime, while the gray team believes that the girlfriend pulled the trigger. Both teams were able to establish that the mistress committed the murder upstairs. However, the blue team missed the chloral hydrate evidence, and the gray team missed evidence on the suicide letter. Both teams have presented their interpretation of the crime to Dr. Shaler. Now it's time to learn what really happened.
Okay, the wife is at home. The girlfriend of her husband comes and knocks on the door, and she comes in. The girlfriend is really a scam artist. She has created this relationship with this woman's husband in order to get insurance money. The wife has wine in the house, and the girlfriend says, "I'll go get it." She goes into the kitchen and she puts chloral hydrate into the glass of wine that she's eventually going to give to the wife. She hands a glass of wine to the wife, and the wife begins to take a couple sips of the wine. After a few minutes, she begins to feel a little sick. The wife is coming over to the sofa. The girlfriend stands up to steady her. The boyfriend comes in. He has a gun, and he pops her. After they move the body, the girlfriend writes the suicide note. The boyfriend places the gun in her hand. The husband comes in. He sees his wife, sees the gun, looks at the note, is really upset, doesn't know what to do. The girlfriend comes in shortly thereafter, and she sees that he's upset. He says, "I'm going to have to call the police." He calls the police because he's got his wife's body here, puts the phone down, and then they hear a noise upstairs. The husband, he goes upstairs. We have the boyfriend is up here. So then the husband comes over and they get into a fight. The husband gets stabbed in the arm. The girlfriend comes in and she sees the two fighting. The fight is spilling over into this direction over here. The boyfriend gets stabbed, just a superficial wound on the side. The girlfriend fires a shot. It misses. The boyfriend, now believing that she is shooting the husband, moves out of the way. Instead, she fires at the boyfriend, killing him. The reason why she's shooting at the boyfriend is because she wants the husband. The husband takes the gun by the barrel like this, and they leave together. But because the husband has called the police to come over to investigate his dead wife, the police are pulling up just as they're leaving, and he's walking out holding a gun. He's also got a wound on his arm, he's bleeding, and so they're both arrested. The students came up with scenarios of what they think happened. Obviously, they weren't able to put it all together because the evidence doesn't tell you what the backstory was. And so it was an interesting lesson for them to know that they can't be 100% accurate with all the facts of the case. They can only deal with the evidence as it's presented to them. Each team, to a certain extent, has done a good job at interpreting the physical evidence. This is really a tough decision. The blue team had the shooter correct. They had the laser trajectories correct. They correctly interpreted the fingerprint evidence they did have. They correctly interpreted the blood spatter that they mentioned in their scenario. The gray team interpreted the blood spatter evidence correctly. They positioned the shooter correctly, and both teams had made mistakes. The gray team did not correctly interpret that there was two shooters, but they correctly interpreted the gunshot residue evidence. The blue team did not choose to analyze the wine. So we've come to a conclusion. The gray team wins. Both teams did a terrific job. The blue team, however, threw away one of the more important pieces of evidence, and that was the wine itself. So they did not pay attention to that. The gray team did. And that's the reason why I chose the gray team as the winner in this particular contest.
It's definitely good that we kept the wine and tested it because we found out that there was a type of poison that was in the wife's glass.
I feel bad because I was the one that dumped the wine. I probably will never forget to test anything ever again at a crime scene.
After getting the reveal of this crime scene, I don't think I could possibly be any more pissed off about the outcome. It's just really hard to take because I think this was one of our best interpretations. We worked harder than we ever have.
The idea of having a complex backstory is important because it tells the students that they're never going to be able to figure out everything. And that's part of the frustration of the job. You're not a soothsayer. You are someone who deals in facts, and you interpret facts. And the facts will lead you so far.